Live, or it's starting right now. How's it going, guys? We're live here, and I got a guest coming to the Poker Player podcast. His name is Johhnie Vibes. Probably most of you come here because of him, because he just got linked. I just got to mute my own stream there. And yeah, I want to welcome you to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on here. And I'm sure, as you're the first person who's actually a live poker player, a lot of people from my audience might enjoy as well what you're going to talk about, because I had some online players on here, and now we're getting a little bit into live players. Welcome to the podcast, Johhnie.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I've actually met you before. I don't really remember. I met you at an Andrew Neeme meetup game.
That is correct. Yes, we met there. I think we played just a couple of hands until I had to take the plane from Vegas back to Europe.
Okay, so you were actually at my table.
Yeah, just really briefly.
I was probably in rare form. I was probably drinking. Is that an accurate statement?
I think you just joined the table when I had to take the plane. That's the thing. So maybe you were drinking before, but yeah, we didn't get to play like that many hands, I believe.
I've been known to mix it up in Andrew and Brad's game.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think those meetup games in particular are pretty awesome. I enjoyed, playing against some people who I've also met from the online world, or mainly YouTube, and seeing those players also in action and play a little bit against them. And also you can see all those vlogs and the hand history reviews afterwards. So that was a lot of fun.
Awesome, man.
So first question I want to ask you is, how did you get into poker? What's your poker story? I'm sure a lot of people know about it, but just also for my viewers or the people new tuning in here, how did you start?
Yeah, for sure. So my poker story it's pretty common, honestly. I mean, I would say the one thing that's uncommon about it is that I literally had no affinity for gambling. Nothing in my family would ever have introduced me to gambling. The thought of gambling on $20 on blackjacks terrified me, even all the way up until I was 25 years old, and I had a 401k, and I was making 50 grand a year as a software developer. Still the thought of risking $20 at a blackjack table frightened me. So I had no actual affinity towards gambling, and I thought that pretty much everything in the vein of gambling was a losing proposition, including poker. I didn't think that. I remember when I had friends telling me that they saw the movie Rounders, and that poker was something that was a skill game. I remember just thinking oh yeah, that's what they all say. I've heard that about craps. I've heard that about roulette. Heard that about all these games. So it was a big hurdle for me to even wrap my mind around opening up gambling as an option for me. And the only reason that it happened was because my brother was super young at the time when the whole moneymaker effect thing happened. He was 19. And online was blowing up. You didn't really have to be that great of a player to make money online back then, especially if you were playing tournaments, MTTs, because the level of play in MTTs back then was at an all-time low. It was the worst of the worst, the beginning of the poker boom. So you could have a score without actually knowing what you're doing. And my brother ran up a pretty sizable. For him, at 19, he made over $20,000 in a month one time, and I was like, I'm making $50,000 a year. When I had a computer science degree, I'm like, bro, you got to show me what's going on here. How did you just run up all this money? And I remember one of the times where I told him that he needed to go back to school. He was kind of fed up with the lecturing that I was always giving him, because I was an older brother. He was living in my apartment. And he just started firing off, congratulations, you have finished first place in this tournament. Congratulations, you have finished first place in this tournament. They were sit and goes, but he would play so many sit and goes all at once, 20, 30 sit and goes, just racking up the FPPs, that he would just forward them to me. And I would get 200 congratulations, you finished first place in a sit and go in one day while I was at the office. And I was like, first of all, how much money did you win today? Second of all, how are you getting first place all the time? Third of all, how many people are in these tournaments? What's going on here? You need to teach me.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's really funny. A lot of poker players, they get into poker because of friends and relatives. And yeah, they otherwise wouldn't have been introduced to the game. And yeah, same for me. I haven't really had any affinity to gambling. Maybe my grandfather, he played also some card games. But I was also introduced to poker by a friend back in Australia like 9 years ago. So for me, it was the same. It was total coincidence, but I was hooked from the first moment. What was your first poker game like? Well, when you online, when you played, like how does it feel? Did it feel like?
Well, the great thing is when I started out, obviously it was a lot easier. You know, this is like 12 years ago that I'm putting money on online, and you could obviously have a very simple strategy of playing tight, playing aggressive in position, and not calling very much, and have like a winning strategy. Like all of a sudden you're a winning player. And it's like, it kind of fools you into thinking like this isn't that hard. But that's all you needed to do back in the day. So with my brother already being a winning player and introducing me to the game, I pretty much won from day one. So it was, and I was always very cautious too. Like I wasn't just firing it off at higher levels. It was like, oh, I can win playing these small stakes. And I never really went up the stakes. I was like, I'm winning here, so let's just continue to do this. So I think that, yeah, like, so I'm sorry, what was your original question? I'm getting off.
Yeah, I mean, just how it felt like playing online poker. You said you were really cautious and you just tried to, and I think it's really good for a player at first, or back in the days, to be really cautious, because you wouldn't like blow your bankroll and get, you know, kind of cocky when you win like $10,000 and just bam, go all in on a high stakes game. And that certainly didn't happen to you, because you were really cautious about the money back then.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually remember the first time that I played in a casino. It was at the MGM Grand, and I was playing 1-2, and I bought in for 200, and that was way too much money for me to be buying in for at the time. Not because I couldn't afford to lose 200, but because I didn't know what to do with 100 big blinds. And I remember getting bluffed in a spot and being devastated because the guy like showed it, you know. And that was like kind of a wake up call that like, wow, this game can be like really scary. And that was what really started getting my juices flowing. And the idea of having more big blinds and playing deeper was something that really piqued my interest early on.
Okay, and that was already in what year when you played?
This was probably 11 or 12 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, so I basically started playing online at Sit and Goes and playing like little tournaments around Fort Wayne, Indiana, maybe a year before I moved to Vegas. And then I played for another year in Vegas doing some consultant work in the software industry. And then basically just one day realizing that I could make more money playing live cash games than I could consulting and software. And I could do it in less hours too. I could do it in like 25 hours a week. So I thought the ceiling was bigger, and the social aspect of being around people and just like figuring out how to make money on my own, it was super fun for me, and it still is fun for me to this day. So that's why I'm still in the game.
I think the initial motivation a lot of the times is that complete freedom that you have as a professional player, and then you compare to your job where you definitely have to work certain hours of the week and you just cannot be your own boss, and that just is very appealing at first. I can imagine it was also the case in your shoes when you eventually said, okay, I'm going to quit the job as a developer completely, and that's what he did 10 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember thinking like at the time that if it didn't work out, I could just get another job in software, you know. And there was probably 5 times throughout the first 5 years where I was like, I don't think this is going to work, or I lost too much money, or the stress of grinding started to really get to me. And then I started thinking, well, I'm not really having that much fun. I remember there was times where I'd be playing poker at the Bellagio, and I would be down like $1,000. And at the time it was a lot for me, you know, because I'm trying to grind out 5K a month, you know, at this point. And just being like, why am I doing this? You know? And then just separating myself and saying, what can I do in this moment that is going to make me happy? And why did I start playing this game in the first place? It was for freedom. And I remember there was one time at the Bellagio, I was down some money. I cashed out, I walked to my car, and I drove to my friend's house in Phoenix, Arizona at like 10 o'clock at night. And I got there in the wee hours of the morning. And he's like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, oh, I just wanted to take a few days off and hang out with you this weekend. So it was like that was the exact reason why I was playing poker in the first place. So it was a perfect reminder of I have freedom. this is why I'm doing this. And then I went and had so much fun that weekend, and I was recharged for when I went back on Monday.
So just to get the order straight, also stakes wise, like about 10 years ago, you were playing there at the MGM, $1, $2, or 11 years ago. And for how long did you have to stay within that limit? Because that's a question of JP here in the chat. He says, how long did you have to stay at 1 to when could you go move up to 2.5? Like how long did that take you to get there? Because also from a live poker perspective, not just from an online play, like the transitioning phase to live poker.
Yeah, for sure. So at this time, online poker was still very popular in the United States as well. So while I was playing 1-2, mostly at Planet Hollywood at this time, I was also putting in a lot of hours online as well. And I had some chance encounters with somebody by the name of Andrew Seidman, who was Beluga Whale Online, who was a big player, who was coaching Christy. And Christy was my roommate, and my brother was playing live too. And so just like being around all these people that made good money in poker automatically elevated my game, and playing online elevated my game. Not to mention that after that point, I ended up meeting some Swedish friends. One of the guys who is a Swedish player plays really high stakes now, and we became great friends. So it was a product of meeting all of these online crushers that were giving me free coaching and elevating my game. Like one summer, I went and stayed with this Swedish kid in Sweden for 3 months and just played online poker with him for 3 months.
Okay, so that's awesome.
So here's the thing is that, like, yes, I was playing 1-2 live in Vegas, and I did elevate my stakes within probably 18 months to 2 years to 2.5 and to 1-3, deeper 1-3 at Win. It wasn't all from live poker. There was like a lot of study involved, and there was a lot of online poker cash games involved. And towards the end, right before Black Friday, I was playing 200 NL on Rush Poker, and I had the highest level of FPPs. I was beating the game for like 1 BB per 100, but I was playing, 800 hands an hour and making all kinds of rake back too. So I was making close to like 5K a month online as well, and then making close to 6 to 7K on live poker playing like 2.5. So, and then Black Friday happened. And then I was like, well, I can't. The great thing about online poker was I kind of developed the fundamentals, but I still loved live poker. So it wasn't hard for me to go to live poker. But playing 2.5 in Vegas and making $7,000 a month just wasn't going to cut it for me. Like I saw bigger things for my life, and it helped that I had my brother and Christy, people that were like pushing the limits, and I saw what they were doing. So it didn't allow me to get comfortable because the people that I surrounded myself with weren't comfortable either. I think that a lot of people get caught in that trap thinking, oh, I'm making like $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month, setting my own hours. My rent's only $800 a month. I get to do what I want, and they get comfortable, and they think that that's like great, and it is for a short time, but you're gonna get tired of that.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly interesting when you look at also what poker as a job is like in the US and how people gather, together, all being in that industry basically as professional players, and that as you say, you cannot just stay comfortable. You have to get out of comfort zone because other people around you aren't. But what happens if you're the only pro and then you don't have that many people around you? Then maybe it's going to be quite different. But what was also interesting that you were playing about the same limits, $1-2 online and $1-2 in live poker at the same time. Whereas here in Europe, for sure, I started much later, but when you go to the live poker games, sure, we have some 1-2 games or 2-2 games, but they're heavily over-raked. They're certainly beatable for like 40 an hour. But we have a lot of 5-5 games as well. So we start actually much higher in live poker than we would be playing online. We would raise the stakes by 10x. How did it feel like having the same stakes live and online? Did it really, like when you made that all in on the river for $140, was it the same with a click of the button, or when you had to shovel in, let's say as a bluff in live poker, was it different for you? Did it feel different?
Oh yeah, it was 100% different. And the thing about online poker is I never really had a big bankroll online. I would always have in the neighborhood of like $6,000 to $10,000 that I would play with, and then I would just perpetually take my rake back because, like I said, I wasn't beating the game for that much online. It was more practicing my fundamentals, making rake back, beating it for a couple, and then cashing out my rake back at the end of the month. Making like $2,000 to $5,000, and then So like clicking a button was a lot easier for me. But then like when I had like a live bankroll where, you know, I had like maybe 20,000 in my live bankroll, losing $1,000 in a day felt like really detrimental. Even though it doesn't, it's the same, like it's not really that big of a deal. Losing live cash feels different to me than losing online cash because I was paying my bills with the live cash and it was like money in my hand. So there was always a separation to me. And if you take it a step further and if you actually played for dollar bills and not chips, I'm sure it would be amplified even more, you know?
Yeah, I mean, also when you think about, for me, it was similar because of the stakes. Live, I was always playing 2 to 10 times as high. So when I lost at a 10-20 game, then it felt much worse, of course, than if I lost, you know, 500 big blinds at $1, $2 online. Yeah. Even though, like, the reality is if you lose 5 binds, it's 5 binds, and you should sort of think of it that way. But when you lose, like, in a straddle game, like just recently I played 2040 and there were someone suggested a round of straddles. Well, you know, it's going to go fast. You're going to be stuck quite a bit. And it feels so much worse because it's such a high variance game. You can just be up like 20, 30,000 so quickly. And then it's just so significant money and it feels much worse than being stuck online, I would say. So I had a similar experience there.
It's a double-edged sword having people that in your circle that are such high stakes crushers, because while it elevated my game, I had problems with bankroll management for sure. And there was a couple of reasons for that, because everyone that I knew was playing super high and had expensive lifestyles, and I was participating in their lifestyles all the time. Now, like I remember participating in credit card roulette one time, only drinking water and losing for like $600. You know, and I remember going out to XS and spending $600 at the club one time because like all of my friends were doing it and like it wasn't a big deal for them. And then all my friends were going to Barcelona for the weekend and I went, you know, like I was always, and the other thing about it was if I ever went broke, which I lost all my money a couple times, all I had to do was ask for a loan from one of my friends and they would just like, here's 20,000, no big deal. And then I could just pay it back in like a couple months. Like I would just grind for a couple months and then just pay it back. I remember one time when I went to Sweden and stayed with my friend, they wanted to like travel all over Europe. And I'm like, sure, you know what? I got $20,000. Why not? So we went to Barcelona and I spent like probably 12 to 15,000. I had like 5,000 left. I'm like, hey guys, I haven't played poker in like 3 weeks. We've been traveling. Can I go to Casino Barcelona and try to win some money real quick? Of course, I lose it all in like 2 sessions. And I have to call up Christy and I'm like, hey, Christy, can you put money in my bank account so I can fly home to Vegas and grind again? Oh, by the way, when I get home, I need another $10,000 so I can play 2-5. And then like I borrowed the money, ran it back up. So it's like, it was a double-edged sword having these friends. Sure, it made me a great player at the time, but it also lended itself to some very bad habits by me.
Would you say that you got a little bit out of touch? I mean, it sounds like that you got a little bit out of touch with the money because your expenses side was set high and you, like one of the big mistakes you could say that, some people make or up to some extent is that they live too high on too high level with their expenses. So definitely. Is that what you thought at that time? And when was that roughly?
Yeah, so now this is this is before Black Friday happened. Like this was right around Black Friday.
Okay, those were the baller times when you could make money everywhere, online, live, and just money was coming in. So when you compare it to today, do you are you still someone who values luxury a lot and you need a lot of money to, to make in poker so that you have a good lifestyle?
Yeah, so it's shifted a lot for me. I used to value things a lot. Like I had a nice car and I had a motorcycle and all these things. And at one point, I just stopped valuing things and switched it over to valuing experiences. So while I don't buy a lot of things, like I live in a studio apartment here in San Diego. I mean, the studio apartment does cost me $2,500 in San Diego. It's an expensive place to live. And I actually do have a nice car now. But for the longest, like I didn't even have a car. But the point is that I just loved spending my money on experiences, like going to see places that I had never been to, experiencing cultures that I had never seen before, and just doing stuff and just like having fun with money. And there definitely became a point where I basically just stopped worrying about money. Like no matter how much I had and how little I had, it never really like mattered to me anymore because I knew that if I lost it all, it wouldn't even matter. Like I would still be able to live my life, pay my bills. Like I had created this network of people that would support me. I was so confident in my ability to make money in poker and my knowledge in poker that if I ran my bankroll down to nothing, it was like no big deal because I could just make it back in a month or two if I just grinded for like a month straight, you know?
Well, a lot of people who would be in your shoes, wouldn't they think that what if something significantly happens in poker, like everyone raising the rake by 30, 40, 50% or 100%, then all of a sudden, you know, the winning rates would go down so drastically that spending your time playing poker would actually be often a waste of time. Have you thought about that?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's definitely been points in my life where I'm like, what if this place closes down? And the place closed down. Then I'm like, what if they raise the rake here and kill the game? They killed the game and raised the rake. And there were definitely times where I was like, what am I going to do? Like I still to this day don't have any income outside of poker. And that's like a travesty considering that I've been in poker for this long and made so much money. And I really don't have much to show for it. So I'm a cautionary tale in one respect, but in another respect, like I really don't care. Like I know I have so much confidence in myself that I'll just figure it out. And like, I have no idea how sometimes, but it's always going to get figured out. Like,
Well,
I don't think that there's any point in wasting energy and being worried about it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's also because you can see that humanity as a whole is not going to change. People are going to love playing poker, and people are going to make a lot of mistakes playing poker because they're going to be emotional on that level, not just on a strategic level, but also you have developed skills as a poker player that, yeah, it can basically exploit people because they get emotional on a big river spot, and you're just going to make super good decisions there over the long run, and therefore have a really high win rate. Like, how would you rate like your skill set at the moment? Where do you make the most money playing live poker? Is it more that side that you have the live tells and pick up on small things, or is it more like the strategic side?
I think that like people like Phil Hellmuth and some of these old school guys, they glorify these like white magic type things. But in my opinion, that's all crap, honestly. Like you really have to know
white magic.
you really have to know your fundamentals. And while I have like a solid base of fundamentals versus like the casual guys that I play with here in California, if I sat down at a table in Europe with online guys that are specializing in 100 big blind poker and they all had 100 big blinds, it wouldn't even matter if I could buy in for 500 big blinds. Like these guys just know their thing. They know their charts. They know all of the math. They know when to put the money in, when to fold, when to raise. They know all of these things. And I would be out of my league 100%. But where I make my money is I'm playing in a player pool that I'm significantly better than. And also I'm playing super deep. And when people make mistakes, they're making mistakes for so much money. And one pot for 500 big blinds in the higher stakes can like set me up for 2 months.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. And one of the things I can see you mentioned like those online guys, and in the US, I think there's fewer online guys because they have to go to Canada or to Mexico and then basically, come to the live poker tournament. That's not going to happen nearly as much, maybe in Vegas, but not in some other venues. And what I also could see is that, yeah, when it comes to those live poker games, as you say, when you're playing deep stack, you have those really large edges, but those online players that might come to the game, they might have limited bankrolls for those games as well. So they cannot really get into your game.
Yeah, like I'm in general, the online players infiltrating the games that I play in, like 1 or 2 at a time, doesn't even bother me because they don't usually play super deep. They usually play 100 big blind poker. Yes, they play well, but there's so many other spots at the table that it's not going to be that big of an issue. It becomes an issue when they all start infiltrating the game, wearing headphones, not talking, making the game uncomfortable, never straddling, only playing 100 big blinds, cashing out when they get to 200 big blinds. That's where it starts to become an issue.
Yeah. I just recently talked to someone about that contribution that you have to make in a live poker setting, especially if you're totally different. Like if everyone's an online reg and just battling it out, well, then it's maybe different. But what if there's a setting of recreational players, professional live recs, online recs, etc. Well, you have to contribute something to the table and not just sit there with your headphones and do nothing. And I feel like that in international settings, I have I do much better in that. Like when I play locally here, there's not so much table talk going on, but internationally in Las Vegas, I think people talk more in English-speaking countries than in German-speaking countries.
Yeah, I think that it might have something to do with the context of poker in Europe in general. You know, Europe doesn't have a rich history of playing poker, so poker is a relatively new thing. And in a lot of people's mind, in poker is a way to make money. And the way to make money is by knowing all of the fundamentals, executing the fundamentals perfectly. And in America, we have a rich history of poker. I live downtown, by the way. You could probably hear sirens.
Yeah.
In America, we have a rich history of poker being a game, and it being a game of fun where people gather around, smoke cigars, drink, you know, have a lot of fun. Europe doesn't have that history. So now we're coming from this background in America. Yes, there are like better players do win, and you should know yourself if you want to be a winning player. But we still approach the game in more of a fun kind of way. Like we have poker nights for fun. Can you imagine these people? Sorry, these people. I'm not trying to like call you these people, but in Europe, like having a poker night with friends where they all sit around and watch like soccer games and, you know, drink beers and stuff. Does that happen very often?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes. I mean, not you know, as much as in America, but it certainly happens for maybe a bit lower stakes. I also see it in the US. Maybe they play much faster. When you look at all the live TV shows, they are all going to be super fast paced. And in Europe, we have a lot of tanking going on. So it's just something that we do differently, I guess, from American players. And that's a little bit of shame because, well, yeah, it just is a different culture that developed. And you say that has roots from like decades ago, because poker used to be also, you know, a game in the US decades ago, just, you know, different, like 5-card poker instead of no limit. And in Europe, it just, yeah, became this game where people just played for money. And when you give off, you know, anything at the tables, who you are, you know, what your skill set is, you might lose some of your edge. Whereas if you keep your mouth shut, you're going to make the maximum amount of money. That's not necessarily true, right?
Yeah, no, well, I actually do think that that's true. So here's the thing, like,
why?
When you're playing in it, like, let's say I'm playing in the main event, right? And some big stakes. And every time I raise, there's a guy on my left who thinks about it for a while and never says a word. And he looks like you. I'm like, this guy's a machine. This guy's a robot. I don't think he has any feelings, none whatsoever. You know? And then like the one time where I give up my small blind because I'm like, I'm not going to mess with this guy. And he like flips it up and shows me that he has an ace or something. And he's like, oh, I had an ace, good fold, or, you know, whatever. I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's a human being. Like, he's giving me information. I don't think he's actually a robot anymore. Maybe I can actually play with this guy. And like, once he becomes a human in my mind, I no longer am scared of him. And that's 100% true.
There you have it, guys. If you want to beat Johhnie Vibes as the poker table, just don't talk to him, act like a machine, and just keep on raising until
the point is that, like, but who wants to play in a game with that guy?
That is true, and that's what I was referring to. Like, if that's why I meant you're maybe making more money in the short term, but if you keep on doing that and you're not giving people any action on a social level, well, maybe you're not going to get the action back in the future, and then you're going to make less money because you don't get into those games. So people just they're not happy playing with you. As you say, in a cash game, it's actually important that people enter the pot with you, because if they always fold to you, might print some red line because you take the pot down pre-flop, as you say. But you know, you want, when you're 500 big blind deep, you want the people to play with you, to think that they have a shot against you, because if they don't, how are you going to win their money?
No, I totally agree. Like, there's a bigger picture here. Like, you can be a robot and a machine and dehumanize yourself, and that's going to work in the short term. But the big picture is that it's going to be worse for you in the long term. I actually unequivocally believe that you won't get invited to games. The games that you are in will tend to break quicker. People will not want to play in your games, and that's the long game. The long game is fostering a healthy environment at the poker table.
Next to,
That's why, like, I mean, in like for the longest time, I was destroying the games here in San Diego, the highest games that they had, the 5-10 game where I live, and everyone liked me. And I'm like not going out on a limb when I say that. Like I would win almost every single day, and at the same time, everybody was like, "Oh, Johnny's here! Like let's have fun!" And it was like a great environment. But there were guys that would come in that they would be like, "Oh gosh, so and so's here again," and he's a winner too. Like he's gonna win all the time too. But there was a different way about us being in the game, me versus him.
Yeah, I mean, it can happen certainly that, yeah, different regs who win exactly the same amount, they're perceived to be less fun to play against. And even though they're winning, it's not about like someone winning. As you say, I think for recreation, it's important that they have a shot at winning pots against you, that, you know, you don't humiliate them in any way, so that you keep it friendly. And if they, you know, if they made a bad play, you don't berate them or something like that, because that's going to be super negative. Yeah. By the way, is there something they would say in a recreational that makes you hate playing against them? Like for me personally, like drinking is totally fine as long as it's not super drunk and like keeps vomiting or some shit. But like smoking is something I couldn't stand.
Yeah. So luckily in the United States, the culture of smoking is on its way out the door, and there's not really any casino that I'm aware of that where you can actually smoke in the poker area. So that's actually a really great thing. I remember when my brother was running around the streets of Fort Wayne, like Indiana, like 15 years ago. It was all in like backroom bars, underground games, and he had to deal with that all the time. Luckily, we don't have to deal with that anymore. I would say the only thing that really bothers me at the table is when good players or just anybody berates a bad player or offers strategy and like makes a bad player feel uncomfortable or a recreational player feel uncomfortable. That's the only thing that truly irritates me. The other thing is when somebody goes after a dealer. I'm like the white knight for the dealer. I troll the person going after the dealer, because in California, that like we have a lot of times where people think that the dealer has some influence on the cards, or that like things like, can you scramble the deck, dealer? Or if they get bad beated, they stare at the dealer like it's the dealer's fault. It's just so ridiculous.
It's pretty stupid. When it comes to a 1-3 game, someone asked in the chat, what do you think should be the bankroll requirements when you're a good player? Let's say when you're winning, how much downswings would you expect?
So this is such an it depends question, but I'll go ahead and throw in some assumptions. So let's say the assumption is that you're winning $30 an hour at 1-3, and that you are a pretty low variance player, and that you live in a $600 a month apartment. You don't have expensive taste. Like, this is why it's an it depends question, because I'm like throwing all these things out there. These things are all important. Like, how expensive is your lifestyle? Do you eat ramen noodles or do you eat steak? And so like if you have a very inexpensive lifestyle, a low variance style of play, and you're a 10 BB an hour winner, you can operate on a significantly lower bankroll than someone that lives in a $1,500 a month house and, you know, travels and only wins 55% of the time because they play a high variance style, even though their hourly is the same. Their standard deviation is a lot different. So I would say if your bills are really low, you're playing 1-3, you're making $30 an hour, you're still working like 30 to 40 hours, I think that you could probably survive on like probably 8 to 10K. I mean, that's like bare bones, but I think you could do it.
Yeah, probably gonna have like a 5K swing here and there, but I would definitely, like from my experience, because I've been in Vegas as well, and I've seen like the development over the last 4 years. And when you play small stakes poker, $1, $2, $1, $3, the problem about it is that the rake has they have become more rake inefficient. Like they almost have like a $50 pot would rake $5 now instead of $4 or $3 in the past. So definitely raise the rake. And I think the entry level to really make a living, what I suggest to people is, you know, if you want to make a living, play 2-5 and up.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it also depends on like what your standard of living is going to be. It's funny because I live in San Diego, and for me to afford the standard of living that I want, I needed to be buying in for 3,000, and I needed to be in a 5-10 game where other people were buying in for similar amounts. And that was no problem for the longest time. And then that game died like 2 months ago during the World Series. So now for me to have the same exact lifestyle, I can't play 5-5, which is what they're now spreading. I have to travel to play bigger. I have to play PLO, which I have no experience in and I'm not good at. Or I have to do some other things like start selling more merchandise or start offering coaching. Like there's other things that I can do, but I can't simply just go back and play 5-5 and have the standard of living that I want to have.
Of course. I mean, yeah, the tide's gonna maybe change, and as you say, PLO is gonna be a game that comes up rather frequently. I think it's gonna increase in the like this year at the area. PLO was a much bigger game than it was like a year or two ago. I mean, they spread so many more tables during the World Series of Pod Limit Omaha than it used to be. So things are definitely going to change, and you have to basically adapt. And it's also something that I was also recently talking with someone. Do you think sometimes about people that are not from the online background that have also maybe similar life experience to you, maybe even more, 20, 30 years, and they can no longer beat the games? Like how frustrating that could be. Have you thought about them, or do you know players who have?
I mean, of course I've known players. I don't want to really out anybody, but there's players that I've played with in California at the 10-20 level that are like household names, and they can't beat that game. Like they were basically the fish in the game that I was playing in, which is really interesting to think that they're a household name and they can't win anymore. So I honestly don't know what they're gonna do. Like for me, I'm trying to make myself a more well-rounded person. I'll always be able to make money in poker because I'm always going to be working at it. Maybe I won't be able to make money at the highest limits, but recreationally, I'll be able to make money at lower limits, no problem, for the rest of my life, as long as I keep doing it. But a lot of these guys that have played really high stakes are not willing to go down and play low limits, number one, because they're not willing to, make $4,000 a month. And number two, like they don't have any other skills outside of poker. So I literally have no idea what they're doing. For me, like I wanted to create some skills outside of poker. I also wanted to challenge myself creatively. That's why I'm doing things like the blog, my clothing company, coaching, just like all kinds of stuff, helping my wife with her yoga stuff. And I just wanted a more well-rounded existence in general. So
and this is certainly something that with anyone I've talked about, who is in poker and does it professionally, that they think about this, that they not only think about, okay, well, it was live now, but also in the long term, that they have other skill sets they can make money with in the future. Like I have a teaching degree, and I actually quit teaching for poker, but also these days I'm also doing coaching because I then have also some different experiences, and I'm also creating content here on YouTube, like a podcast or some strategy videos, or just to keep on doing different things and not just play poker, because it would be also less fun at some point. So have you had the experience that at some point poker became less fun? Did you have a period of your life where you said, okay, well, why? You said, what am I doing here? But
exactly.
Can you describe that a bit?
I think that everyone that plays poker on a consistent basis, where it's either your sole source of income or you're playing it more than 25 hours a week, reaches a point where they're like, first of all, can I win? Because we all go through those periods of time. And second of all, you're like, am I even enjoying this game anymore? And I think that answer to those two questions is obviously you can just look back at past history and look at your graph and know that this is just something that you've gone through before. And secondly, I think the reason why people stop enjoying things is because they're not progressing through whatever it is that is. So in poker, sometimes people stop enjoying it because they're not learning, or they're not getting better, or they're not growing as a poker player. I think that's super common because it would be like anything. The more you get results in something, the more inspired you are to continue to do it. I remember when I started making a vlog, I made a couple and it was fun. Like I wanted to have a creative challenge, but then one night I woke up and there was 400 comments on one of my videos, and like I was getting a new subscription like every 1 minute. Like 1,000 subscriptions in one day. I'm like, wow, like what am I going to do next to up it? Like this is giving me energy. giving me more creative juices are flowing now because of this. I think that
Dopamine.
yeah, the same thing was happening in poker where you were like continually getting better or continually winning bigger pots, or now you're crushing the guy that used to crush you. You get reinvigorated. But if those things aren't happening, like if every day I woke up and the vlog numbers were down, or if every day I woke up and everybody was like, man, I really hate the clothes that you're putting out. Like your energy would start to slowly dissipate to the point of where you're like, do I really love this? Am I really having fun doing this? And the way to remedy that is to get better at it. Because as soon as you start getting better at it, you'll reignite your love for it.
But quite naturally at some point, this is a book tip that I have for you guys if you're playing poker professionally, if you think about it, and that is you're going to hit a plateau. And there's this guy, George Leonard, who has written a book called Mastery. And he's actually going about that plateau that you're hitting sooner or later, that you're not improving or not visibly improving. Maybe you do improve, but you don't get the immediate results. And that can make you, quite sad at times, but then you have to keep pushing sometimes to, make yourself a better player. And also another thing that I think is important is that you are also developing other skill sets, that you don't only define yourself as a poker player. And if poker things, things in poker go wrong, that you let that, you're basically let down by that, right? So if you're just a poker player and it's not working, then you're maybe just, let down.
I think the one thing that's really interesting is you could actually be improving at poker, but the pace that you're improving at is not the same as the pace that other people are improving. So it could appear that you're getting worse when actually other people are just getting better faster than you. So yeah, I mean, everybody experiences, I think somebody like a professional athlete, when their career is over in basketball, their identity is so wrapped up in being a basketball player that it's like, what do I do next? Like you hear it all the time with people like Michael Jordan, like what does he do after he retires as the best basketball player in the world?
That's really some question that I think I just yesterday I talked with another poker player about the meaning of what we're doing. And he had me. He said, look, he's done so much meditation that he somehow got the answer that it's all within. It's not exterior. We always look for that external, achievement, but once we get it, what's next? Like if you make it to the pinnacle of your poker skill and you just win all this money, like what's next? And the answer is, well, you just gotta look for something more, but then you have to find happiness from within yourself. And it's also something, have you got into meditation or some sort of self-development like that? Or
yeah, I'm big into self-improvement in general. And I'm currently taking a course where we are encouraged to meditate every morning. So I did meditate today, but I'm very inconsistent on it. It's something that I've been really trying to work into my daily practice. And I prefer to do it in the morning because I feel like it sets a good intention for my days. And it helps me with getting my day going. Like I feel I don't find as much value if I do it later on in the day or at night.
Yeah, if you started as sort of a morning routine, you also have maybe build up the consistency, because in the morning you might not have an excuse. Because you wake up, unless you really want to do something specific, you can just say, okay, now brush my teeth or whatever, or eat something small and then meditate, and you're not going to find another excuse or something else to do before you start going.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I want to touch on here is that in poker, it's just like anything else. There's going to be points where you struggle with purpose and you're wondering, am I really doing the right thing for my life at this point in time? And I think the thing to keep in mind is that if it's not poker, it's going to be like that with something else. So for me personally, I have this long-term vision of what I want my life to look like in the long term. And that vision is actually never going to be realized. Like it's always going to be kind of adapting, and there's always going to be things sprinkled into it. And me navigating my life is going to be in this journey to that vision. Okay. So my vision for my life was that I would be able to have freedom and that I wouldn't be a slave to work, and that I would be well-rounded and I would be able to do things that were fun for me, and I'd be able to spend time with my family, and I'd be able to travel the world. Did I know that the way I was going to achieve that vision for 12 years was by playing poker? No, I had no idea. But that was the mechanism that ended up happening for me to achieve that so far. And if it shifts in the future, I'm like, let's say that I blow up a business and I start making so much money in business. There's no possible way that I'm going to be working 55 hours a week, 60 hours a week, because then I'm not living the vision that I had for my life, where I'm like living this well-rounded existence.
So that was also similar for me, that I used to, think of my future life as something that I basically can live life at my own terms. But now, what is your vision for the next 5, 10 years? Because that used to be your vision, and then with poker you achieved that because you have now this freedom. But what's the plan for the next 5, 10 years? Who do you think you're going to be in 10 years?
Yeah, that's the crazy thing, is that like this is still my long-term vision. Yes, while I have arrived in some sense, I'm sprinkling new things into it. Like there's so many places that I've never been to. I haven't started a family yet with my wife. So like kids are involved in that, raising kids, building new businesses, all things that I mean, it's tough. Like that's the thing, is that there's never going to be a destination. It's like always going to be this thing where new things are going to come up. And like, yeah, sure, marriage was a destination, but after marriage now comes having kids. And sure, having a kid is a destination, but what happens when they go up to college? Like there's going to be retirement, or there's going to be more things. So while there are many destinations, it's still one long journey of me having a vision of living my life on my own terms.
There's something I've done in this year, basically. So last December, and that is I followed a name called Leo Gura on actualize.org, and yeah, self-actualizing is named after that channel, named itself after that. And I bought his life purpose course, which talks about all sorts of areas from your life, how you grew up and all elements that come with it, and that you just have to reflect a lot and basically write down all your values that you have in your life, that you have seen, and how satisfied you are with those top 10 values in your life and how you're living them. For example, if you're, one of my values is justice, like how much justice am I having in my life right now? Is this really something that I would say, well, this is just, or like for other people, do I think it's fair that those people are having that, and can I do something about it? And I think that, yeah, following that course and really reflecting on everything that was in there has helped me quite a lot to self-improve and find more clarity on where I want to head in the future.
Yeah, that's part of your vision. That's part of your vision for your life. And like, I think a lot of times people don't even sit down and get clear on what their vision is. They just get caught up in like living their life. And how do I make my next dollar, or how do I have my next meal, or what's the next vacation destination? And they never really stop to take the time to think of, what do I really want? Or like, why am I doing this? So I think that what you're doing, and what I really try to do, is I try to be in that question of why all the time. And I try to hone in on my vision. Because if we don't have the vision, we don't even know where we're going. We're just like going, basically.
Yeah, and oftentimes it's actually pretty difficult, and that's why I loved that course, because it gave me so many guidelines on what I could do, what I could think about. Because a lot of people, they will struggle at first, and I struggled a lot, to find the right questions, because sometimes you might know that you have to do something in your life, but if you don't have the right questions, well, how are you going to work on it? If you don't come up, or if you not naturally have this this gift that you can ask yourself the right questions. So you have to have it from somewhere. So that's also something that we call is like some sort of mentor that you have. Do you have any mentors or someone you look up to and learn a lot from?
Definitely. First of all, I love that this conversation went this way, because like I'm Johhnie Vibes, and I don't even know how it got this way, but we're talking about being spiritual and having vision and living your best life and doing all these things and self-improvement. I love it. I absolutely love it. But not exactly what you would expect on a poker podcast, I guess.
Well, it's sort of a little bit my fault, because I do it a lot as well. So I get into self-improvement and so I bring up this topic probably quite naturally. And if the person I'm talking to is the same.
I definitely have mentors. I mean, within poker, my brother has been a huge inspiration for me, and he's always been better at the game than me. So it's always been really fun to work with him and have someone to aspire to be in terms of poker. Christy, his wife, is someone that's continually pushing the envelope when it comes to personal development. And that is obviously a role model for me. My wife is someone that's also does the same, who does it physically as well as spiritually. Like she's an absolute monster when it comes to yoga and just being in touch with her body and like being able to do whatever she wants, like stretching wise or physically fit wise. So I have all these personal mentors around me. But outside of that, like people that I don't know, somebody by the name of Lewis Howes, who I listen to his podcast all the time. I'm actually going to Columbus to see him. He's going to bring together a lot of speakers. I just love being around that kind of energy, man. It just like lifts me up. It energizes me, invigorates me, and it feels good. It feels good to be around positive people, people that strive to make you better. It's just so much better than being in that other space of being a victim or why did this river card come or why didn't I just call it off with queens the other night?
Hey, don't you enjoy those stories?
Yeah, no.
I really actively want your attention for those rivers.
Oh man, it's pretty interesting. I actually do get a lot of DMs about poker hands. I had to create a group on Facebook because I got way too many hand history DMs, and I'm like, okay, if you want to send me a DM, you're gonna have to put it over on Facebook. And I have a community of people that are gonna answer. And if you really want me to see it, you can tag me in the hand history and I'll do my best to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to start delegating these things. If you got like 1,000 messages, you can't just help out everyone. But there's people who are in your firm is going to be more than happy to help people out. About some hand history. So yeah, people love hand histories and asking questions about it, and sometimes also go into your firm on some other firms and posting a comment here and there and helping someone out about their hand histories because but at the same time I feel like that people overvalue them also a little bit. It's not just about an individual hand, but it's also about your range. Like you always think in poker of what do you do with your range in that context, and you don't just play your individual hand. And that's oftentimes a question that's not asked in the poker industry enough. And sure. It's also good that it's not asked often enough. Otherwise, we would have a tougher game, right? But this is actually
a much tougher game, and that's actually one of the things that I've really loved that's come out of creating these vlogs. Is something that I didn't even realize as much before. Is one thing that really gives me energy is helping people, and I've noticed that through all walks of life, not just poker, but through like charitable things and just being culturally exposed to a lot of things, the times where I've helped people or the times that I've connected with people have been the most personally fulfilling for me. And I get messages all the time that people tell me that I've inspired them to go after their dreams, not necessarily in poker, but that's the kind of stuff that really fills me up and really gives me energy. And helping people gives me so much energy. And people always ask me, like, are you concerned with letting people see how you think in certain spots? And first of all, my audience in general is lower stakes players, and I'm not really going that deep. Sure, I'm going deep in relation to a lot of the other poker vloggers out there, and sure, I play a little bit higher than the other poker vloggers out there, but I'm not talking for 10 minutes about one street on one hand. And when I'm doing a coaching session with my brother or with someone else, I'm talking for 10 minutes on one street on one hand. But in my videos, I'm talking one street, one hand.
You can't do that.
It's like 6 seconds, maybe.
Yeah,
well, I am helping. I'm not like super deep.
Yeah. You also, when you talk about hand history, you cannot really bring up those long, correct explanations. You have to simplify that for people and make it entertaining so they will listen. Like if I bring up the correct solution about a hand, and it's definitely easily achievable if you run a solver around it, but you can see the audience retention graph when I bring up PL Solver, it goes like this, and PL Solver comes in, and damn, it's gone. Like I'm out of here, right? Like
you're such an analytics guy, man.
What?
You're such an analytics guy.
Why did I mention
Oh, because
analytics?
you're like tracking when the PO solver comes up, and then you're looking at audience
Well, I
retention.
just wanted to know if people enjoyed what I'm doing on YouTube, and I saw that I brought up PO Solver, and even though it was absolutely correct, I was saying in that people just I'm out. Like if as soon as PO Solver comes up, like you don't want to go for that on YouTube and try to learn like that. At
Yeah.
least very few people do, and the majority
No.
is going to come for entertainment mixed with a little bit of strategy. So you got to serve that audience basically.
Totally. And I'm fully aware that the reason why my channel picked up so much traction so quickly, well, there's a myriad of reasons, but one of the reasons was that I was playing higher than most of the other vloggers, and people were interested in people that were playing higher. So I wanted to give them that. But the long game for me for this is it's a creative outlet, and I want to continually push the envelope with my creativity to the point of where I want my channel to be reality TV one day, where like people are logging on to like my channel and going, what's Johhnie up to this time? Like what's the central character? What's the rising action gonna be? What's the lesson gonna be in this episode? What's the drama gonna be? And have every episode be a self-contained episode with, oh my gosh, did you see what happened last week on Johnnie Vibes vlog when he did this or that? You know, and the problem is that it's hard to do that with real life. And number two, I have an audience and I have to cater to that audience, you know, the poker audience. So it has to be poker themed in a lot of ways. But my end goal is that you tune in, you watch an episode, could be some poker, could be some travel, but it's ultimately about me and my life. And we don't talk strategy through any poker hands. And everybody that's there for poker leaves the episode saying, that was super entertaining, super informative. I learned something about Johhnie. I learned something about myself. And I thought it was visually, creatively, a great piece of content. That's the end goal for me.
Yeah, I mean, also when it comes to poker content in general, I do believe that it's not only about strategy, the whole story behind, also, yeah, how you feel at a poker table, what makes you uncomfortable, etc. I think for you, I wouldn't necessarily even say that you just because you play high. I think that relatability is really important. That people see that you went from being playing 1 to 10 years ago now to playing 5, 10 and higher. And making a living out of that, also having a good lifestyle is really what people want. And they're going to sign up for your story for that reason, because you have what they want to have. And then, automatically that draws in people because you're living their dream.
Yeah, no, and I think that dream is still attainable for anybody that wants that dream, but it is a lot harder nowadays because it's not the golden era of online poker. It's harder to get more hands in and really learn about your own game, unless you're abroad. Like if you're playing in Europe, you can play online and stuff. But in America, to climb the ranks from having no bankroll to having a 6-figure bankroll playing high stakes is a lot more difficult than it used to be. And if I was in the same spot right now with no poker knowledge 12 years ago, I don't think that I would have made it. Or if I would have made it, it would have been largely because of the people around me that made it and like pulled me along with them.
Well, maybe look at your situation. Like maybe you would have made it, but with more sacrifices, sacrificing part of your lifestyle. And maybe that wouldn't have been possible for you, but maybe another version of you that then adjusts, because that's really what you got to do in poker. Let's say you're now in a tougher environment in poker, like you were 12 years ago. Like now you just have to say, okay, I can do the same, but I just have to cut my expenses really low.
Yeah, no, you actually you're right. And it's funny because there's times where I always have this inner voice inside of me, and I don't know if you have this voice too, that always thinks that I can do anything. Like in the back of my mind, I think that I can figure it out and get it done. So I think that that's played into my favor my whole life. And actually, I think that comes from your parents, honestly. Like I remember my dad is so delusional. Like when I was 22 years old, I tried out for the local semi-pro football team because I had started I developed a little bit later in life as far as physically. And I remember I ran like a 4.840, which is like pretty fast for a normal human being. but not for someone that's like trying to play at a high level athletics. And I made the semi-pro team as like a wide receiver. And I remember my dad saying, "Son, you need to go try out for the Indianapolis Colts." And I remember thinking to myself, like, "Dad, you're crazy. Like, I run as fast as some of the defensive linemen are running, as some of like the offensive tackles are running. And I've never played high school football. I've never played college football. And you just think I can just go try out for the Indianapolis Colts? That would be like your mom telling you to go try out for your local top level football team in your country because she thinks that you can do it." But that's what I grew up with. That's the inner voice that I have inside of me. While it is delusional at times, I think that I can pretty much do anything that I set my mind to.
I mean, yeah, that's certainly super interesting when it comes to you know, how your confidence is built. It's certainly super important what your parents are telling you, which story they're telling you. But I also talk with this with another poker player, and that is, when your parents tell you, well, you can do anything, they always have to tell you also with what sacrifices it comes. Because yeah, you can reach anything in life, but you have to be able to, for example, in poker, work harder than anyone else. And if you're not ready to make that sacrifice of working harder than everyone else, you're not going to make it. Most likely. Maybe you're just a super talented guy, like 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, and you're still going to make it. But most likely you're just the average guy. Like most likely you're going to be in that 70, 80% of people that is average by nature, and then you just have to work hard, and then you're gonna get it. But often,
yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I remember, you know, my lifestyle growing up was I had to, you know, I was mowing the yard at like 7 years old. I was doing laundry at like 8 years old. I was basically, I was the oldest child, and my mom was a school bus driver, and my dad worked in a factory when I was young, and they were divorced. We survived on a family income of like $25,000 a year. So like I was expected to pick up a lot of the slack, and I had to work hard as like an adolescent. You know, I remember like contributing to the family as a super young kid. You know, I had to pay for my own 2 years of school. I never really had anything handed to me. And it was those lessons of hard work combined with the you can do anything that created this synergy of me actually believing it and me actually achieving it. So yeah, you're right. It's more than just thinking that you can do it. It's actually having the foundation.
Sounds like a super, super good combination, yeah, that both that you just mentioned in your life. When it comes to self-improvement and, you know, being really thinking that you can do anything, how does that go at the poker table in the sense of, you know, when, for example, when you took a shot? I'm sure it's really in the back of your mind, and I don't want to remind you too much if you don't want to go into it, but you took a shot at 25-50, and there's that one hand that still bothered you, you know, you can see it on the vlogs and etc. So yeah. How do you think of it as of today?
I talked a little bit about this in the vlog, but there's a level for everyone where the judgment in your mind starts to shift from logic to emotion. You know, because everyone has their level that they're so comfortable with, where logic is Trump, where logic is king. And once you start to get into uncomfortable levels, the emotion starts to creep in. And and anytime emotion creeps into poker, it's obviously very detrimental. So how do you think that you're supposed to get over this piece of emotion creeping in? The only way is practice. You can't just intellectually know that, okay, I'm going to take a shot, and I know because I'm intellectually taking the shot that the emotional stimulus that's going to happen in my body, I'm just going to stuff it. No, you can't do that. Like what you have to do is you have to experience it over and over and over until it starts to become less bothersome, until the point where you don't experience it at all anymore. And for me, I have been experiencing it in some big moments, in some big spots lately, and it's cost me. You know, it's had me make decisions out of emotion, out of fear, where I shouldn't have. And me now having the awareness of that, it better prepares me for the next time that I go into that situation. And maybe I don't like fix it the next time, but I guarantee the emotion will be a little bit less the next time, and a little bit less the next time, because I'm continually evaluating and working on it.
Well, you're gonna get used to it at some point, I would say. But yeah, to that is like, how do you limit the damage that it does? For example, like what would you estimate your win rate is after you play a game that you would have an edge in if it weren't for that emotions. But once you factor them in, like how does your win rate drop to 0 or even close to that or even below it? Like what was your estimate? Like were you still profitable at that point, or do you think it just made it unprofitable?
Well, this is something I talk about a lot. I think self-awareness is huge in poker. And while I do think that I still had an edge because of some of the poor players in the game, I was definitely didn't have an edge against some of the players that were equal to my ability or slightly worse than my ability because of that. And I took a step away from the table. Once I got to the point of where I felt like I wasn't being the best player that I could be, or I wasn't willing to work through it in that moment, I had the ability to step away from the table and regroup. And I didn't like bust it all, which I see people do all the time. Like I'm in this game until I get it all back or until I go to 0. Like every single time that I've been in a tough stretch recently where I was second guessing if emotion was playing a factor, I've actually walked away from the game with my full stack in my hand. It didn't result in me busting.
And there's something that really helped me is the work with solvers. It just made me so much more confident in my decisions, so that even when I take a shot at high stakes, I will try to make the play that a solver suggests, and I'm gonna look up every single hand that I play. I try to model it, and then if I'm okay with the decision, as long as the decision was fine, I'm gonna be okay with losing money in the end. But if I then and that's sometimes going to be the case. If you're going in and take a shot at high stakes, you're uniquely going to be put into a situation that you wouldn't be in a lower stake game, right? You just, some people on that game, they just have other abilities, and they're going to put you into a spot where you haven't been before, and you haven't trained that spot before at these stakes, or with these ranges exactly, because it's 9 max instead of 6 max online. And then you're going to have to make a decision. And for that, what a solver has helped me in particular is to have guidelines, just guide us and stick to it. I'm just going to stick to it no matter what. And that has helped me a lot for the game in pre-allo.
Yeah. I really agree with that assessment. I think it's a great tool to help you build confidence and help you evaluate. But at the same time, there's no two situations that are the exact same in poker. So one situation I could be more prepared for the next time, but there's always going to be something a little bit different. There's always going to be a new factor in this next hand or the player is going to be different, or the game flow is going to be different, or the stack sizes are going to be different, or you're not going to have the ace blocker in your hand this one time that you did the last time, or whatever it is,
Yeah,
that's what makes poker such a beautiful game.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. There's unique situations, but I think there's one consistency, and that's what they usually don't teach you in most poker coachings and on these sites, is that oftentimes it doesn't even matter as much what you do. If you consider your range, and if you don't do anything completely stupid, like having, for example, in pot limit Roma, we always have 4 cards, right? And bluff catchers are going to be not similarly strong. There's some bluff catchers that are weaker, that are going to win less often because they got the wrong blockers in their hand. There's going to be some bluff catchers that are much stronger. And if you're in the game and you have awareness of where your bluff catcher is at, if you think, okay, this is a good bluff catcher, knowing that, and say, okay, if I call here with this good bluff catcher, it's going to be okay, even if he has me beat. But then if you go into a very bad bluff catcher, and you actually would know that it's a bad bluff catcher, but then your feeling sort of talks into a call, then you're going to make a biggest mistake at taking a shot. And only then. But if you're knowing that you got a good bluff catcher and you're going to make the call, and even if the person is under bluffing a little bit, he's going to have some bluffs sometimes, in most spots, I would say, except for like very unique ones. But that's like exploitative poker that you have to learn as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the best bluff catcher, because the hand that you're talking about where I folded, I actually had the best bluff catcher in my hand. And I actually knew that intellectually at the time. But I still, what I leaned on was people's frequencies for overbet bluffing on river. And I knew that people's frequencies were so low for that. And the other thing that I leaned on was what are the natural bluffs here? And I really couldn't find too many natural bluffs. So I steered away from what the bluff, me having the best bluff catcher because of those things.
So here's my different take on that hand is I really like your thought process exploitatively, and it has worked a lot of the times. For instance, when I just saw a hand recently that he played, he had 9-6 of spades and the board came check 10 monotone, and you just check raise and fold it to a flop 3-bet by Brad, where he has ace queen of spades. And that is just a unique spot where you cannot naturally, 3-bet bluff that often with certain hands, and there's only very particular hands that do that, and the amount of bluffs to the amount of value is just so ridiculously weighted towards value that you just folded. And I like that because first of all, also you were quite deep and your hand couldn't improve, so you had 0% or 100 or not even 100 but 30% of equity, no, 70% of equity. So that example alone showed me that did you have that exploitative approach that I really like. What I would have done in your shoes with the ace king is, if you think that, they have little natural bluffs and, a tendency to not, overbet jam as a bluff that often, so they are under bluffing. What you could have done is, okay, you have the best bluff catcher. You can flip a coin once for a 50% bluff catching frequency, and if you can flip a coin twice for a 25% bluff catching frequency. And if you do that, I am really hating folding range. So I am ready to try to exploit people thinking that they're under bluffing. But if I know, and that's really what you also knew in game, that you have the best bluff catcher, what you just do is, okay, you say, look, I'm folding almost every time, but sometimes I want to be calling just in case he is bluffing here. And that way you're already exploiting because you're folding so much. You're folding maybe 80, 90% of your range, but those 10% of the time you're still calling, and it's just making it impossible for an opponent to just try and run you over with like some really high bluff frequency with hands that you wouldn't have come up with.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a really great way to look at it, is breaking it down by percentages. I actually love breaking down games in terms of percentages, because it kind of simplifies the game in my mind, like, because thinking that I'm going to do this sometimes doesn't really have value in my mind. But when I say I'm going to do this 50% of the time or 40% of the time, now I'm like gamifying it. And I feel like you can do that in all aspects of your life, not just poker, and have it be helpful for you.
Like, well, what would you say? Like, what area could you think of?
You're putting me on the spot here. So yeah, like if you want to make a decision on seeing your friend, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, I keep saying that I'm gonna see them sometimes.
Just
right?
flip the coin.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I keep saying sometimes. Let's attach a percentage of the time that I'm going to see them when I ask this question. And then if you assign it 30% of the time, right? And now it's been 5 times that you've asked yourself this question, and you're like, I haven't seen him once. I'm like, I'm under visiting my friend.
Okay, that sounds like you're applying game theory to real life. Like, this is certainly interesting, and this is not the GTO podcast, but there's also this. I got a friend who once told me about petrol stations, and you can also make a game theoretical approach to which petrol station you're going to visit. You sometimes got fluctuating prices and petrol stations. Some of them are cheaper and some of them are more expensive. And then you can, say, okay, if the third is cheaper than the second or the third, then you can take it or then move on. Because at some point, of course, if you pass like 7 of them, you wouldn't. But obviously, nobody would do that because at some point you ran out of gas. But this is also something that you could do.
The poker mind is such an analytical mind, man.
There's so many games you can play. Like, let's. I don't know if you're up to it, but do you mind talking money? I mean, on like experimental sense of how much would you do this and this for?
Of course, yeah.
All right. That's one of the most interesting things I think about poker play, and shows really their attitude is you have this one job, like let's say it's in Vegas at a pool, and you're like the person standing there, and you just gotta welcome people to the pool area, and you're just standing there for 12 hours a day. Let's put it that way. Let's say you had to do that 5 out of 7 days a week, and you couldn't move except for like 5 minutes every 2 hours, and you had to do it for 12 hours and not 8 hours. So you had 60-hour weeks. You have to do it for a year. For how much of a salary would you do it?
Oh, wow. So how many hours a week is that?
That's 5 out of 7, 12 hours.
So we're looking at 60 hours a week.
60 hours a week. And
no vacation.
This is all you do. This is all you do, those 12 hours.
That's tough. I think I'm going to go with 850,000.
Okay, that's a good healthy number. I think it was
that's like my bare bones bottom number.
Yeah.
And even then, I'm not excited about it.
And there's also a question when you go to the 8 hours and you can play those games and you sort of get to know yourself a little bit, how you tick with money, like what you would sacrifice, how much time you would trade for money. And then also the other question is like, what would you do if you woke up with 100 million tomorrow? Except for pouting. Let's say you have pouted as much as you wanted, you maybe spent already 2 million, but now you have 98 left.
I've actually thought a lot about that. And the interesting thing is I don't think my life would change that much, in a sense of I would still probably be doing things like creating content, creating clothing. I would still play poker, but I would probably only play like a couple times a month. And I would travel a lot more, and I would own a couple homes. So my life wouldn't change a whole lot, with the exception that I would be traveling a lot more.
Okay.
I wouldn't really be buying things though. Like that's not really me, you know?
Okay. That's a super interesting question, I think, to anyone. If you answer that for yourself, the $100 million question, and it's completely different to what you're doing now in life, you probably gotta have to do something about it. I mean, it's just maybe you have to make that paycheck and just keep on working for a little bit, but try to create a side hustle or something that you just have passion for. And I think that energy that you invest in those, side hustles that you have passion for, it's not you will bring that up somehow.
Definitely.
Right?
Oh yeah, so, I mean, I think that what you're alluding to here is that we have one life to live, right? And what's the point in spending all of our time doing something that's like that we're not enjoying? I'm like totally on board with that.
So someone in the chat says, I told myself $16 an hour. Well, it's 12 hours a day, not just 8 hours a day, because some people are actually doing that job, but just for 8 hours, and they probably have breaks and everything. But I wanted to make it extreme, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, because that's going to be, you just standing there. And I couldn't even stand for 12 hours, probably. It's like a pain, right? Just standing there and saying, hello, how are you doing?
Yeah,
for like 12 hours. That is super hard.
I've done this before with some of my Swedish friend asked me, how much would it cost for me to live in Prim, Nevada? You know where Prim, Nevada is?
I actually don't.
It's a border town between California and Las Vegas. And there's literally nothing there except for a gas station and this one casino. I don't even think they have a poker room. And he's like, you're not allowed to leave the premises for an entire year. And I don't remember what the number was, but
you have like an internet connection?
You do have an internet connection, I believe. Yeah, you have an internet connection. You're just not allowed to leave Prim, Nevada for an entire year.
Like, is the air conditioning fine in the home and etc.?
It's fine, but you're not allowed to play online poker either.
Oh fuck. Well, can I play on all this Bovado or those American sites, or
nothing? No online, no source of making money through poker.
Damn it! What can I make YouTube videos?
You can make YouTube videos of your life in Prim.
That's all you can do. I don't know, man. That sounds like selling a year for amount of money.
I mean, that's the same with the pool, though. You're selling a year of your life.
No, you have 2 days off.
Oh yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, that is a big difference because you can travel on the weekends.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot get outside of there. Like, you can't meet anyone. It just, you have to invite them.
For sure.
Party there, so that's really horrible. By the way, I also want to ask you guys in the chat. We got still about 40 people in here. a lot of you guys have questions for Johhnie Vibes here. I'm sure you have a lot of chances otherwise, but here on the podcast, maybe you've been inspired to ask a certain question that you come up with. Let us know. The ace king hand was basically a board where there wasn't a king 3 deuce deuce 10 board with a flush coming in on the river, and it was a 4-bet pot, 3-bet pot.
It was a 3-bet pot.
3-bet pot. Okay. So
it was in log number 41. If anybody wants to see it.
Yeah, it's on this log, so you're gonna find it. So if you guys have any questions now in the chat, or you can look back in some time, let us know.
I actually don't have access to the chat. I've just been looking at your face all the time.
If you open the link, I can actually send it to you. You just can access to the chat. I'm actually gonna just send it.
I think I can pop it out here. Here we go.
Yeah, just gonna mute it.
There we go.
Oh yeah, coaching. I want to go a little bit into coaching. Yeah, right. Is Johhnie enjoying coaching for the first 8 students? You got 8 students. Is that?
Yeah. I do have 8 students, and I'm pulling up the pop-out chat real quick. And I am enjoying it. It's like, this is something that I alluded to earlier. I actually have a lot of fun helping people and articulating your thoughts, helping people through their thought process actually has intrinsic value for myself as well. Because it helps me get really clear on what I want to communicate. I'm also doing preparation with my brother and my particular coaches to help me in my coaching sessions. So I'm doing my own homework in general. So I think that I'm having fun. I'm helping people. The people that are being coached are really enjoying it as well. And it's adding something new to my day that's really well-rounded. I think it's gonna help me in all aspects of my life, not just particularly poker coaching.
I've talked with a lot of poker coaches as well, because I'm coaching players myself, and there's like this one theme that is like the best students will always be the ones that are not looking for the magic pill. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like that.
I think that's one of the traps that people get caught into is, well, I've been getting coaching for 5 hours now, and I actually lost money in my last 2 sessions.
Yeah, that results here in an S.
They'll say something like that.
Yeah.
But it's obviously like not something that can immediately see the difference. It's going to be something that's lasting. Another thing about coaching that I actually really explore with my students is mindset. I think a lot of people fail to go into the mental part of poker, and they get so caught up in fundamentals that they don't realize that the emotional piece of the game and the mental part of the game can be so debilitating. And I've seen guys that are so technically proficient that just don't make it because they don't have the social, emotional, and just like the even wherewithal about them to maintain a positive existence at the poker table, and it self-destructs them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think mental game coaching is extremely important, even though I'm not like when people watch me sometimes on Twitch, I can get quiet, negative as well, especially when I run bad for a very long time and playing lots of hands on stream, and it's just going to be that reiterating thing. But when it comes to mental game coaching, I think it has to be an element of your coaching most of the time. And surprisingly, although I had one student, I'm obviously not going to mention any names, but he came to me and he basically, in like the 2nd or 3rd session, wanted just to talk about his life. And I was so surprised. And after 20 minutes, I told him, look, I mean, I got so much PLO to teach you. Don't you want to talk about PLO? And he said, no, I want to talk about this. And this is what I need. And I'm just going to listen. But then the problem is, well, he's not going to certainly improve at PLO, like for that lesson, right? It's going to be not enough time put into that, but maybe you could figure out a question or two about himself and his life. So yeah, you always have to ask twice sometimes that, is it really what you want? Yeah. And I'm certainly you would offer people also just some advice on poker and how they're in the industry, how they're going to plan to do things, and what I have done for myself, because I've been probably someone who, it's not naturally someone who, I raged a lot when I was younger, like a lot more than I do these days on the stream when I'm running bad. I used to smash rackets on a tennis court and all of that because I was just so mad. It's just.
And I honestly, that probably didn't really have things to do with poker. That probably had things to do that were going on inside of you, or even outside of poker that were manifesting itself through the bad beats,
Well, I don't know. I mean, in tennis back then, everything was fine. Like it was even like 13, 14. Everything was going fine. So I was just mad. I was just mad at myself for fucking up the game or something, even though it was for nothing. Like there was nothing at stakes, and I was super mad. And I don't know. Until today, I haven't completely fixed it, but I've certainly found ways to reduce that amount of tilt that comes with it. And I think knowing the right answer in poker situations and just knowing what good poker looks like is key. Like as long as if you know what good poker looks like, you can be super tilted. Like some people, they raise 7 deuce offsuit because they have such a big ego in the live poker setting, and they just want to show people who's boss. And that's just exactly what I would have never done in my life, except for when we played the 7 deuce game. Have you ever played the 7 deuce?
Yeah, no, I understand. Well, ego is also a big part of poker that you definitely don't want to have involved. Like your ego is your enemy at the poker table.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You have to try to deal with it and do a lot of work regarding the ego and what you can do, just to not let it dominate you at your thoughts at the poker table, especially at the live poker table. It's even more than online, I would say, because if you have to show up, you have to appear on the setting, and people can see actually how you look like, right?
Yeah, I'm reading through the chat a little bit, and one of the questions I see is, what is the most common flaw that I have to address with students? And this is actually something that I've noticed with some of the students is they're asking questions that don't really matter as much, or they're thinking about things that don't matter as much. So they'll say something to me like, this person did this like little look at their chips thing before they bet, and I'm just like, stop thinking about that. That's like level 1000. Well, that's like the Phil Hellmuth White Magic course. Like, what is their range and why are they what could they have when they're betting? What do you like? How is your range interacting with this board? I'm asking them the questions that they should be thinking about rather than them telling me things that they're thinking about. I'm like, let's fix the thought process.
I completely agree, because if you fix the thought process, you're doing so much more than if you just fix the hand. You really want for someone to spot what is relevant and what is not. And I think it's on you as a coach to say, okay, this is now very relevant, that you think about that a long time during this hand, and not about, or like a step-to-step guide, what you should think about in a poker hand. And I really also try to, push that area forward, that actually what you're doing and why you're doing it and how you can improve. Like how you can improve not only, by reviewing your hands, but also working with programs. People don't have to work with solvers. They can just use an Equilab and get into it, count combinations, just do some basic math. That's just a little bit more advanced than what their opponents are doing. Just stay ahead of the curve. That's what I would tell people to get better. And Poker Truck organizers, Andreas, Johnny's the coolest, calmest person you'll ever meet. I mean, you're very calm in general. How you don't seem like you get agitated. You might get
Yeah, I mean,
when's the last time you were really agitated, like really pissed?
So this is actually a funny story between my wife and I. There was a time where we were like driving home from somewhere, and she's like, "Is everything okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm feeling like really irritated right now. Like I want to take the car and drive it off the road right now and crash it into a tree." And she goes, "Excuse me?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, I feel like freaking out right now." And she's like, "You just said that in the most calm, rational voice that I've ever heard for someone that's going to do something so drastic." And I was like, that's not really what I'm going to do, but that's kind of how I feel inside. So there are times where I feel like that inside, but it's not really like, my demeanor usually stays pretty calm.
Yeah, but at the same time, yeah, I mean, you might feel like that because it's a thought. And if you don't identify with that thought, you don't have to live in it. Like, there's this one phenomenon that we all might know if we're living in an area where there's a lot of train stations. Like in Switzerland, there's a lot of train stations. And there's the phenomenon of like a person, of that thought that you would push a person in front of a train. And it's a real thing. That thought comes up with a lot of people. I also asked myself that question, and I read that one article, and I actually don't know the phenomenon, but that the thought comes up is absolutely normal. Like acting on it and identifying with it is like another level, right? If you then do it. But like in the end, nobody pushes, or almost nobody pushes someone in front of a train, but you actually do have that thought for a split second, and you can even notice that thought, but it's never happening because you're not a, you know, not a psychopath or something.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a human being. Like, of course, like when a bad beat happens or something detrimental happens in my life, I do feel it. Like there's something inside of me where it's like, ah, that hurts, right? Like doesn't feel good. But I do generally have a calm disposition. It's part of my physiology. It's part of my makeup. It's part of who I am. So I do understand that it's harder for other people to naturally just become the way that I am, or naturally be able to handle these things the way that I do without, like, you know, taking CBD oil or smoking weed or something. Like I'm just naturally like this.
Yeah, some other people have to take drugs, and they say, "Oh, what is it that you take?" Say nothing, man. So another thing that is also very interesting to me is like what is good for poker. We already dipped into it a little bit with you know, the tanking, with like being sociable at the poker tables, but also in a recent podcast with Xflix. By the way, guys, if you enjoy this sort of podcast, don't forget also to subscribe to the channel, because there's going to be lots of podcasts also in the future if you know keep showing up, of course. But yeah, I also enjoy them, so I'm gonna keep producing them, and you can learn from poker people that I'm inviting to this podcast. And we're going to talk about poker and life and everything around. So if you enjoy it, don't forget to also smash those like buttons and subscribe to the channel. So what I asked Xflix in the last podcast is, you know, what is really good and how can we, for example, bring more women to poker, because it's going to help us out in the end all, because poker is going to grow. Like if we get finally understanding that poker is not all that bad, you know, because people have that image of poker that it's really horrible, because we have like 50% of the population almost not playing it. That's my theory.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a tough question to tackle. And I think one of the things that has to happen is the current women in poker need to be treated with respect and with the same level of respect at the poker table that the men are being treated. And I think we're over and over again seeing misogynistic behavior or behavior towards women that's demeaning them, which is deterring other women from entering the space, or the women that are currently in the space are not coming back. And I think that it's natural for men to be upset or be irritated when they lose to a woman. And no matter what it is, I don't care if it's poker, like if it's tennis, if it's a race or whatever it is, if you lose to a woman, there's something primal inside of us that fucking hates it. You know, like we all understand this as men. So what happens though is that there are some men that can't handle their emotions, and they're manifesting this at the poker table, and they're lashing out at women from time to time, or calling them sweetie, or like demeaning towards them, or honey, or just like stupid stuff because they can't handle losing to a woman.
Maybe you should write a book, or you should write a book about guidelines how to etiquette about the poker table with women. Maybe that should be a thing. But I mean, you're good friends with Chrissy. Like, what are the examples that you could think of? Like some of the, except for the ones you already brought up, like calling names and lashing out to them. Like, is it something particular, like the lack of respect? Does it come up with a discussion between you guys, or not at all?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been times where she's felt the wrath of an angry man at the poker table. Where it's gotten like racial, where it's been like, you effing B word. And this is like something as a man that I don't really have to deal with, right? Like at a poker table, I don't have to worry about some other man losing to me and being like, you're an ugly man, whatever, right? You suck at poker. Like that happens every once in a while from somebody that's super angry. But the frequency that it happens to a woman is so much higher. Like the fact that I actually don't remember. I mean, I get called names all the time now because I have a poker channel, but like physically at the poker table, I don't really remember anybody telling me that I was ugly to my face, or telling me that I look like Osama bin Laden to my face, or someone calling me a stupid Mexican.
Yeah.
But the number of times that someone has hurled a racial slur at Christy
Mhm.
or called her an effing B word at the table is more than 10 times
That's
throughout.
that's quite insane. Yeah.
And it just stems from the fact that she's a good player winning money off of men at a poker table.
Yeah, it's just that ego thing. And I think also that the reason why men might do that as well is because they think that she's not going to fight back physically.
Hmm. I mean, there's so many reasons, but I
Yeah.
think what it comes down to is how that person feels about themselves. Like they lash out at somebody like this.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, understanding that people get emotional, like I would never justify that sort of behavior, but yeah, being strong, like you probably also get stronger as a woman too. If you, like, not saying that it's anything good, but I think by being able, of course, not to accept it, but to deal with that sort of thing, so you get like a thick skin.
Oh, definitely. The strong women definitely survive, but what's in question here is, are the weak women, quote unquote weak women, leaving the game, or the new women that have never been exposed to poker being so intimidated by their first or second experience that they're just never coming back.
Yeah, I mean that's really.
Right now.
Yeah, maybe if you get those average numbers up, I see it a lot of the EPTs here in Europe, that there's in the $400 buying events, there's not very rarely 2 or 3 women sitting at those tables, and it actually, I don't know. I think people there might be more polite or something, but a lot of people bring on their girlfriends or wives and they start playing, and in those more recreational tournaments, like a $400 tour is more recreational tournament here in Europe. Women sit down and play. I mean, it gets better and better, I would say, at least here in Europe, in those
Yeah,
small tournaments. Yeah.
and I think I recently heard that one of the top chess players in the world is actually a woman now. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that I read that recently. And I think it's like also a simple fact that women aren't as drawn to fields of logic and fields of gambling in general. So
Mhm.
you're overcoming that hurdle in a sense, and then you're overcoming the intimidation hurdle of the way that men act at a poker table. It just creates this environment of women struggling to enter. It's a big barrier of entry.
Mhm. I think a lot of what is happening now is with Twitch and everything. It gets just more public, and people, watch Twitch channels at home, and then they see these online players. It can also get an entry level for also women, I would say, to watch
I actually
online
love
poker at least.
I
What?
love that. I love that Twitch is blowing up and that the women on Twitch are being rewarded almost unproportionally to men. Like more people are tuning in to watch women. Am I under the correct
Mm,
assumption?
I'm not even sure of that. Like, yeah, some women do super well, but the same problem is happening there too. There have been women on Twitch. They've been insulted by a lot of people as well. So they have the same problems on there, like in a poker setting.
I see.
So yeah, a lot of women might have stopped at some point because
I
they've
wonder
been
how
also
I wonder
insulted.
how it is with women gamers that are playing like Fortnite and those kind of things. I would
I
think
actually
I would think
don't
they would
watch.
have a distinct advantage because if I was a man, I mean I am a man, but if I'm
Yeah.
tuning into Twitch, if I'm tuning into Twitch to watch stuff, I think that I would be more interested in like watching a girl play a game than watching a man play a game. I don't know. Like it's maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like it would be more entertaining for me. I don't know.
Yeah, it probably depends.
Yeah.
Like some girls that I've watched on Twitch, they're doing they're painting and playing piano,
Hmm.
something like that.
Twitch is super interesting. I think that if I lived in a country where online poker was legal, I would probably play MTTs on Sunday for fun. And Twitch is something that I would definitely experiment with, but it's not something that we can really do here in America. And I am not keen on endorsing any unregulated site. So just going to stick that in my back pocket for now.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain risks that you just don't want to have in your lives with those unregulated sites. I also have I have a problem with most of the sites that are not the main competitors, basically, because there's always some risk involved, and I don't enjoy playing poker on them as much. So it's a little bit a thing. So did we have another question in the chat coming up here? 2 of the top 3 children chess players in the world are girls. That's really good that it's catching on.
I think that's what I read. That's probably what I read, I think.
Do you think poker can be played in the Olympics?
No, definitely not.
It's just not. I mean, there's just so much luck involved. You just can't do that. Also, someone mentioned in the chat, PLO. Do you still try to learn PLO?
No, PLO is taking a back seat for me.
Okay.
Because I'm super self-aware of the learning curve that it's going to take to become one of the best players in the game. And I'm not willing to put in the work that it's going to take at this moment. You know?
Well, it takes you a couple of months.
Yeah.
In live poker, especially. If you have the live poker skill set, if you feel comfortable at the table, you can learn PLO quite quickly, but you have to put in the work. That's true. If you don't have those hours, it's not going to be.
And my existence right now is very well-rounded with all the things that I'm doing. I just don't know if I can devote the time that it's going to take to get there as quickly as I would want it to get there.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm not sure like how good it is to to develop those skills over time, how much sense it makes it, or to start at some point. Like a lot of people, they got into PLO and then they say, I wish I started earlier. And they kind of regret they didn't get into it earlier. I think including me, I wish I went into PLO like 7 years ago and just stuck with it, because it would have been, probably be at a much other point. As I got more into MTTs and mixed games. But yeah, I mean, maybe some mixed games in the future are going to catch on, and then I'm certainly going to be in a good seat to basically develop those games a little bit and tournament wise, I guess.
I feel like I'm fighting a little bit of an uphill battle with just my natural disposition as a person. Like being the oldest child, always been super responsible with like just being safe in kind of all aspects of life, does not translate well to PLO in general. Like I can't control a lot of the things that happen before the flop. You know what I mean? Like I have to be okay with gamble, and my natural disposition is to not be much of a gambler.
That's a very good point. I think
it's hurt me a lot in No Limit Hold'em, but not to the point of where I can't overcome it and coach myself through it. In PLO, it's even more debilitating. Yeah,
especially if you don't run it twice. Like PLO is going to be such a gamble in so many spots, especially when it comes to pre-flop. I mean, you could even go into pre-flop wars, and you definitely probably don't want to do that, because playing 4-bet pots is like flipping a coin, almost.
Yeah, and you have to be okay with it.
Yeah, you have to be totally okay with it, and yeah, having those swings is maybe not what you want with your natural tendencies. Someone asking in the chat, make it to the top from starting 1 to 5, 10, 20. Well, we talked a lot about it in the podcast, Eric, and I think it comes down to hard work and believing in yourself. I think that's what it came down to, right?
That's the equation right there. Like it's just A plus B equals C. C is making it, A is hard work, and B is having the belief that you can make it.
Hashtag no more PLO. We no more PLO talk in here. Well, I don't go too much into it if you're not PLO player, of course. With all those I might. But another one is also, what about tournaments?
I don't play tournaments, and that's another thing, is that this comes from my aversion to gambling. I don't like participating in things where I'm not going to win the majority of the time. Like that's why I don't gamble in the pits. That's why I don't play blackjack. That's why I don't play roulette. That's why I don't play craps.
Okay, so you really have the intention of having as many winning sessions as possible. So I can hurt, of course, also your bottom line if you're trying to book a win. Is that a pattern that you see? Sometimes you try to book a win.
Like that's something that I was talking about. Like it's something that I have to overcome to become a better player, and it's something that I continually work on and continually am striving to overcome. But it creeps up. Like it's part of my anatomy that I'm trying to stuff down and get past. So yeah, it for sure hurts my bottom line.
Yeah. I mean, this is maybe something that Phil Hellmuth would call white magic stuff, but that actually exists. So like if you in live poker ask someone how much he's up or down, that can actually have a big influence whether he's going to fold to your river bets or not.
Totally. Yeah.
This is incredible. Some people count their chips, and when they're like up 100 or up 500 and you bet 700 on the river, sometimes they're just going to fold to it because they don't want to be down 200. That's insane. But people in live poker do that so much more. In online, obviously, you cannot tell, but in live poker, you see people counting the chips, and they're sometimes making that separate pile for winnings and for their buy-in. And
that's crazy.
It's pretty crazy how you can level.
Different levels of it, you know?
Yeah, like how we can level people in that regard.
I was one of those people online that had the cashier like peeking out of the corner, so that I could kind of keep an eye on the cashier.
Fuck.
Yeah, that's bad.
Like what really tilts me is like the EV line. Like I don't care about like whether I'm losing or winning, but like online I have that EV line, and when it goes down, it just pisses me off. When the money doesn't go in well, but it's obviously also going to be variance that directs the EV line short term, mid term, and then long term. Of course, your EV line should go up, 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 up. But these days, yeah, also rake influences the EV line because you might be much better than your opponents, but the rake in PLO especially is horrendous. And in live poker, I think...
Are you German or Dutch? Are you German or Dutch?
I'm from Switzerland, so German speaking initially. Yeah. And then, in Europe, unfortunately...
I'm not sure on Swiss EV lines. I know that the Swedes have like a really good EV line, but yeah, I'm not sure how the Swiss do.
You mean the red line or...
the EV line where you're running above expectation.
Okay, that you run above and below. Like, yeah, there's no country thing, I would say, but I think the Swedes should have good red lines because they're aggressive, or the Scandies, they're the red lines, non-showdown winnings, basically. Yeah. But what I love about the US and Las Vegas and where you play about live poker in general is that the games are actually fair. Like the rake is super reasonable in a lot of places. Sure, some of them, they kill it because they raise the rake. More rake is better. And it makes the games maybe soft or short term, but it's going to break at some point. But, I just like playing 5-10 in Vegas PLO because they have like time rake, and it's just so much better than here in Europe. Can you imagine?
Yeah, no, Vegas is the best place in the world for rake.
Yeah,
it's amazing. And that's why I think if you're ever starting out in poker, Vegas is the first place that you should go to play low stakes, because you're not going to get killed by the rake, and you're going to have a constant influx of people that are recreational players coming in every weekend to play.
Yeah. At the same time, maybe also there's a lot of professionals in Vegas, whereas in some other hidden areas, there's so few professionals as if you want to game select really well in live poker, right?
Yeah, but the environment, the economics of how fragile a game is going to be much more at like a small town in California. Like maybe the game breaks and doesn't run for like a week straight because two particular people are gone.
What I think is a bit an entry barrier to people, maybe also like me, or people who just try to build a bankroll, playing live poker, is when they want to go to a place like the US, oftentimes accommodation, and you gotta have somehow friends there, right? I gotta know people so they can stay somewhere at the place for cheaper, just pay, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a way. There's always a way. Like, you don't have to stay at the Bellagio. You can.
In Vegas, I think it's no problem, but there's so many resorts that there's nothing around that, right? I don't know. Reno is probably going to see. I don't know the hotel prices, but I think anything that costs you more than $50 a day in accommodation is pretty lethal to your live poker being. 100%.
Yeah, especially if you're playing low stakes, and that's actually a big problem with tournament poker nowadays. Like, I actually firmly believe that there's no one that makes a living without supplementing cash games solely on live tournaments, because of travel, because of taxes, because of accommodations, and because there's not enough volume. You can't play enough. You have to supplement it with cash, or you have to supplement it with online poker. Those are the only two ways.
Here's the thing. More rake is better sometimes. No, I don't want to become an advocate for that, because I couldn't hate that development more. But here's the thing. Those games have really the amount of recreationals in tournament poker is insane. Like tournament poker is softer than cash games these days. It might not be as profitable because in cash games, yeah, you can win by a bigger amount than in tournaments. In tournaments, you know, short stack poker, you know, it doesn't take that much, as much skill, or the skill differences are smaller, or the edges. And at the same time, what you can do maybe in a 500 buy-in tournament, you can have 100% ROI, maybe even more if the field is big enough and if the payouts are good. But yeah, I mean, if it's a 2-3 day tournament and you buy in for 500, it's a slow structure. Well, you make maybe 150 a day, and then you have a lot of variance. So you can say, like, how much can you live on off 150 a day? That's like $5K a month maybe. But if you have a $100 hotel room, it's just the silliest idea ever. Try to look for $30, $50 on that range, especially if you're entering poker. Try to talk to people, and yeah, in my opinion, you have to knit it up when it comes to expenses. That's really also my approach when I go traveling. I'm living off of very low cost because I have a rent to pay. Like apartment here costs maybe 1K, 1.1K. So I don't want to go abroad for a month and then pay another 2K, right? So I'd rather, find something that's a bit cheaper, share a hotel room or something. And then, I'm going to be much better off. And it's like just my approach to live poker, because it can kill your winnings.
Well, there also became a point in my life where I was playing for stakes where I wanted to win $5,000 to $10,000 a day, right? And in cash games. And the thought of sitting in a tournament where the only way to win 5 to 10K would be like getting first, second, or third place was not something that I was willing to do on a day-to-day basis, So once you start playing high enough in cash, tournaments just don't look as attractive unless you're playing in some huge field tournament where the potential to win, hundreds of thousands of dollars is going to happen for everyone that final tables. Like, I probably just don't want to get involved in that because it's not going to be worth my time in general.
Well, in live poker, that is certainly true because people, can lose so much faster in cash games than in tournaments. In tournaments, they can play for hours with one buy-in, but in cash games, they can just always reload and dump, 10, 20, 30K in even a 5-10 game if they want to, if it plays deep, right? They can be stuck for that much, and someone's going to win it. Like, sure, some of it is going to be rake, but most of them, other players, are still going to win heaps of that money in a cash game. Whereas in a tournament, the rake affects things quite a bit. Also, I think for the house, it's going to be more expensive to run tournaments in general. They're going to make more money per table with a cash game than with the rake they make from tournaments. But at the same time, when you look at the online scene, there you have cash games that, the highest cash games on PokerStar as well. Sure, there's going to be a 25, 50 games here and there, and maybe even a bit higher. But the highest Zoom games these days are $2.50, $5. That's really, that's the highest it gets. And sometimes even PLO and No Limit Hold'em, those games don't even run anymore. So you can see that in online poker, it's actually, we see a reversal of that. Like, we see that now tournaments become so much more attractive to new players because until they would be profitable at a cash game at 50 cents a dollar, they have to work super hard because of the rake and everything. But in tournaments, they don't have to work nearly as hard. It could be an entry level that you get your bankroll online these days with tournaments, and then later on go into cash games and develop those skills. That's like at least my take on it.
No, I agree that I think if you are entering online poker in 2018, I would totally recommend playing tournaments. I just think that it's a safer environment for the player, and it's a softer environment as well. Like, the other thing is that some of the problems with cash games are card sharing, bots, other things of that nature that aren't really prevalent in a tournament, MTT, atmosphere.
Well, there are some bots sometimes in MTDs, but maybe not as much. And card sharing is certainly less of a deal, within people. But yeah, I think also the rake is going to be in cash games. They increased it by quite a bit over the last few years. So the rake back cuts is same as rake increase, basically. So they made the environment so that you couldn't build a bankroll as easily anymore, especially on the micro stakes. They even, what really made me sad about PokerStars is that they increased the rake the most at the micro stakes, where people actually are building bankrolls, trying to live that poker dream, and they basically killed it up to some extent. You can still do it, but it's just so much harder. You have to put in so much more work that we talked about earlier on this podcast. We have to put in so much more work to build, an amount that you could just easily make elsewhere. Like when I recommend people like how you should start in online poker, make money elsewhere, then bring it to poker, because you're going to be so much faster and go through so much less frustrations when you make your money elsewhere, then bring it to poker and try to go from there. Don't start with $50 or something. You can do that if you're stubborn, but it's just going to be a pain in the ass.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I'm on board with that.
Airbnb is so helpful. Poker Truck Organizers say, I totally agree. Also get to know some people. Trust the process. Cash game's the way of the real grind, Eric Serrano says. All right. So what also some wrap up question here, and that is, what would you tell your younger self, 10 years younger? What would you tell yourself?
10 years ago, I was just starting in poker, and I think what I would tell myself is, I think I would have told myself to work a little bit harder. I could have definitely worked harder, quicker. I climbed the stakes way too slowly. I spent way too much money. I could have done the same thing, but worked a little bit harder, climbed the stakes a little bit faster, and I would be in a much different position now. And I still would have had the same amount of fun. I'm just now starting to realize what real work is like because of all these things that I'm like inundating myself with. And it's partially because I'm having fun doing all these things. So doesn't really feel like a ton of work. But back then, poker wasn't really work either. The like studying part was a little bit of work, but that's all I was really doing in terms of work. And I could have worked so much harder, and I could have started doing what I'm doing now, or just had this little bit better work ethic sooner, and I would be in a much better spot now. But at the same token, like, I am who I am because of my experiences. So there's no disdain for it, but I would have told myself to work a little bit harder.
Yeah, I like that perspective, that you have that self-awareness that you could have even reached more, but that you don't blame yourself. That's super important. I think that you don't blame yourself for what you've done, but to see that you could have even been more. But it's not really too much blame game, because that's going to hinder you also in the future. I think if you're living in that regretful manner, then also someone asked, Jermaine Burton says, what percentages of your success do you do a lot to your wife, maybe thanks to your wife, right? That's what you're saying, Jamal.
Yeah. Shout out to Jamin Burton in the chat. Thank you for showing up. Jamin Burton is also a popular poker vlogger. If you guys have not checked out his work, he's super entertaining. You got to check him out. And so the question is about my wife. And I think that having that support system in my life and having her be the person that she is has been so instrumental in me becoming who I am, not only in poker, but in life. She sets such a high bar when it comes to ambition and when it comes to work ethic. She grew up in Soviet Russia, and the fact that she's here living in America, #1 employee at a company in a capitalistic country, she's just crushing, and she sets an example really high. She's very supportive. She never makes me wrong for anything that I do. She supports me, and she's great. She's an equal partner. And I think that in poker, it's so tough to have an equal partner, because there were definitely relationships that I had within poker where the woman in the relationship was taking more than giving, because the money that I was having became so fast and so easy. I mean, there was a girl that I was dating that stole money from me. And then she took the money and paid for her rent, and then said, "I'm sorry, I had to pay for my rent. I would have been evicted. You can't be upset with me." And like, what do you do? Like, what do you say to that? Like, if she would have asked me, I might have paid her rent. But at the same point, it's just like that is so common in fields where the money is all around and the cash is there. And to have someone that's so polar opposite of that has been such an amazing thing. Someone that's like equally contributing to the financial success of our relationship.
Yeah, I find that fairly important as well. You know, that's, you know, your partner does contribute in that sense as well. So also in the chat we have, are you still working on the clothing line?
Yes, I still make clothes. That's definitely a creative outlet for me as well. It's been slow because I've been starting the vlog has been very time consuming. I do all of my own work on my own. I do it's crazy to think about, but I do all my own PR. I do all my own marketing. I do all my own scripting of like the storyboarding, the telling of the story, the coming up with the storylines, the production of the video, like figuring out the audio, doing the music, editing the video, playing poker, studying poker, coaching other people in poker, studying to coach other people in poker, traveling, like doing all these things. Like it's hard to fit in designing, creating clothes and marketing the clothes, but it's still something that I work in, and it's still something that I'm working on. Did my own website. I programmed my own autoresponder when you enter your email onto my website. I literally do everything that's Johhnie Vibes related.
Okay, that seems amazing. I mean, I can relate a little bit to that within poker and coaching, teaching side of things, because you have so many things you can do, and you have to somehow, you know, make sure that you don't, you know, end up not catching any of the rabbits, right? that's
for
the thing.
Sure. Yeah. I see a question on tips for new vloggers that want to be successful and make a living on poker for small stakes. First of all, poker for small stakes is a starting point. If you want to make a living, you got to set yourself up, set your goal really high. And as far as vlogging goes, I wouldn't get into vlogging because you want to be successful at vlogging. I would get into vlogging because it's something that you want to do as a creative challenge, as a creative outlet, as something that's going to enrich your life. Because if you start looking at views and how many subscribers you have and comparing yourself to other people, you're going to take all of the fun out of it. And the reason why I believe that you should do it is for fun. The part about making money through poker, yes, that can be something that you work really hard on. It might not be fun all the time. But as far as vlogging goes, I'm telling you, there's no money in it anyways. So you really have to love it.
Yeah, I mean, our content creation in general is something that you also have to think of the person watching that. You got to tell a story. I think you mentioned earlier that the story is super important. And when you tell that story to people, that people can relate to it, it's never about you. It's always about other people. So
story is number one. If you tell a good story through, you know, videos, pictures, your voice, music, that's why people are going to watch. They're going to relate to the story. Number two on the list is vulnerability, being who you really are and not being scared to like put yourself out there in a way where you feel like people are going to judge you or people are going to hate on you. Like if you're always putting on a front, first of all, it's not going to be authentic to who you really are. And when you're not being authentic to who you really are, it's not sustainable. Like that life is not sustainable. For me, being Johhnie Vibes is so easy. Like I just walk out the door and I'm the same person that I am on my videos. Like there's no difference. I just the way that so there's no work involved in it for me. Like I just tell my story, and then when I'm out and about, I'm living my story.
Jimmy brought us, who's this guy Johnny is talking to? Well, you can subscribe to my channel if you're interested. There's a video about me where I introduce myself, or there's a lot of strategy videos on this channel about poker. I'm a pot limit OMA player. I'm living in Europe, in Austria right now, and I'm basically an online grinder that does poker content as well. And I do talk about pot limit Omaha. I do have guests here on the podcast, and yeah, I do share poker strategies. Sometimes maybe have a live poker trip here and there, and that's how we got into this podcast. So if you're interested, definitely subscribe. So I'm not vlogging yet, but maybe I'm gonna be out there someday. But I have to definitely up my game to that. All the cutting, I always think it's so much of a hassle when you have to do everything around that. Like when I go to these places like Vegas and vlogging, what has been really tough for me is to do the work additionally. You know, you play those 8 hours and then you get home, you get some footage, and then you have to, cut it, put it together, some music. And I don't have any of these skills. So
yeah,
I learned maybe about speaking as a teacher as well. So I can do that. I don't have a problem, being in front of a camera, but then at the same time, all these cutting things, that's things that I really need to delegate. Either then cost me a lot of money, like I have to pay someone thousands of dollars to do that for me, or I have to do it myself.
Yeah.
That's a tough part.
There's definitely, I thought a lot about how much money I've lost because I've started vlogging. And I mean, I haven't thought a ton about it, but if I really get caught up in thinking about the numbers, I would drive myself crazy. So when we got our puppy, I probably played 10 to 12 hours a week less than I normally would because I wanted to be home, training the dog, being there for him as a puppy, because like we live in an apartment. So I probably sacrificed $50,000 in EV just by having a puppy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And now doing the vlog, I've been doing it for 9 months now. I've probably lost $70,000 doing the vlog. But if I really got caught up in losing $120,000 from vlogging and having a puppy, I would make myself go crazy.
Well,
and
you cannot. Yeah,
I'm not living my life for the best EV. I'm living my life to have fun and to do things that enrich my life. Having a puppy, creating this content, it's enriching my life.
Yeah, I mean, especially at the beginning of it, as you say, there's so many people have asked me that as well. Why do we even do that? And for the money alone, absolutely not, because you're going to lose so much money you could have done playing. But for me, we talked about this long-term vision, and for me, the long-term vision is really that I want to become a person that can produce content for people, maybe also outside of poker someday. So I got to start somewhere. And I think, producing poker content is also fun to me. And I want to reach people with, what I really love doing. And, if I do that later on and I can look back on this experience and already a little bit more skillful in that, then I already can start, at a higher entry level, basically. So I learned a lot about YouTube and algorithms and, all the social media content. And I think it's just important in general. I can also drop people advice on what they could improve on. And I always appreciate people coming to me and telling me something that I haven't considered yet. So if you have anything, regarding the podcast or regarding any social media content, just let me know. You can reach me on Discord or on Instagram as well, and just reach out to me and let me know what you think of it and, where I could head in the future. Always open up to suggestions. I'm really not, someone who says, I know it already better, because I'm at the beginning. I clearly see that. It's a totally new game that doesn't really give you any money, especially at first.
But I think that we can relate this to poker perfectly. Like, let's say that you're beating poker for $10 an hour. I'm just throwing out a number, right? And if you didn't work on yourself in poker and you just continue to play and continue to make $10 an hour, you would be making that money, right? But if you said, you know what, I'm not going to play for 1 month and I'm going to learn everything about poker and make myself so much better. Sure, for 1 month, playing 40 hours a week, $10 an hour, you're giving up some thousands of dollars in like immediate EV, but you have this like back end EV of becoming a better player. So now when you re-enter the game, maybe you're making $15 an hour. So that's going to pay for itself in the long run. Maybe this is the same thing with having, my YouTube channel. Maybe, giving up $70,000 in the first year from playing less poker in the short term cost me money, but maybe it turns into a bigger business later on. And the puppy thing, I'm going to love my puppy $50,000 worth no matter what. That paid for itself already.
Yeah, you don't really put the price tag on opportunity cost some people, right? That you spend time with. Either you love them or you don't, right? I mean, but so of course, some encounters as well. Maybe you thought about it. There's some encounters that you have in your life. They're certainly not going to be worth your opportunity costs, and you're going to reduce it. Have you actively done that or not really?
I think that I don't look at it in the black and white terms like that. I look at it as energy. And when I come in contact with someone, if my energy is like totally on the same wavelength as them, and I love being around them, and we vibe on so many different levels, that's all that really matters to me. Like I'm not gonna analyze them for what kind of expected value are they gonna add to my life.
Yeah.
Because the immediate energy is enough value for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree to that. There's this concept of like energy vampires who just get the energy out of you. They're also typically trying to discourage you from things that you're doing, or trying to tell you that you're not doing things right, and they're not really finding any meaningful input to what you could do better, right? They're never getting really concrete and saying, look, why don't you do this and this specifically? It's not, because it's never about them trying to help you out or trying to improve you. It's always going to be about them trying to make you feel bad about yourself so they feel better about themselves. So definitely those people, you want to cut them out forever, because they're never going to be as helpful. And you're going to meet those people sooner or later. And these are the energy vampires. It's like some concept I picked up from a German speaker. Talks about those energy vampires, and then people who come into a room, and then you get the energy because of them. And I think that's a super important concept.
Totally. Yeah, I totally believe. I mean, it's the same reason why you can walk in a room and know if people are in a bad mood. You're like, what happened in here immediately? Or you walk into a room and you're like, I just feel like having fun in this space because I feel like there's like a positive energy going on right now. It's so easy to see it. And it's like, if somebody even communicates that they're happy, but you feel a different energy, you know that they're not happy. Like, it's as simple as that.
Yeah, totally. All right. If you have, thank you, Andreas, from Johhnie Live, the podcast. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Poker Trucker Glenn. Is there anything you want to add?
I just wanted to say thank you for having me, and thank you to the chat. Thank you to Jimmy Broughton. Thank you to Poker Trucker Glenn. Glenn is the student that I had in one of my vlog series, which was really fun. That was really fun for me. And if you want to see me being extra zen, you can watch the series on me with Glenn, because Glenn tends to be an emotional being, which is good. I love that he's an emotional being. And our energies like played off of each other. It was a fun series. Shout out to Jamin, like I said, Eric Serrano. Thank you guys for showing up in the chat. Han Win, I really appreciate Han, and you guys will see Han in a future episode of mine, so make sure you subscribe. And Madigan, shout out to Madigan, who has been a constant woman supportive person in my DMs and in my comments. I really appreciate you, Madigan. And thank you, Misty, for showing up to the chat. And whoever I didn't get to, I really appreciate you guys, chat. Thank you guys for showing up.
Yeah, thank you very much also from my end to give my poker podcast here with Johnny Shot. I also hope that you enjoyed my end of the content, and that you are going to be a regular maybe on the podcast. I hope that get to subscribe and maybe listen to some more poker stories. I'm really trying to get some people here on the podcast, try to improve, and then try to see what questions I can ask people and which direction I'm going. And yeah, I hope this becomes a regular thing, and maybe have you back in the future if there's something coming up. Talk about some updates. And yeah, I want to thank you as well, Johnny, for being here on the podcast. It has been a pleasure to me. I've had a lot of fun, and yeah, hope to have you get back. And thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate it. And I hope to see big things from you. And it sounds like you're the channel to follow when it comes to some high-level PLO analytical thinking, just based on our conversation that we had.
Well, yeah, guys, if you enjoyed a great game of Pot Limit Oma, there's not just some people. And yeah, I definitely try to put out some content in that regard. I stream also on Twitch, twitch.tv/AndreasFurley. I am streaming there Pot Limit Oma games online on Stars, 50 cents a dollar most of the time. And you can watch me basically talk strategy. I also have a bankroll challenge. If you are playing online these days, you can learn about me trying to turn $24 into $1,000 in no longer than 30 days. I'm on day 20 roughly, and about halfway there. So positive, I can still make it. So if you enjoy these kind of content pieces as well, hope to see you on this channel. And yeah, hope that you guys enjoy this podcast. And thanks a lot again to you tuning in.
All right, thanks, man. Talk to you soon.